It's hard to believe, but the holiday season is coming up again. At Quince, you can find all you need to wear this season. Sweaters, coats, holiday outfits, and everyday essentials. I just ordered a new sweater from Quince that is perfect for all my holiday gatherings. It just arrived and it's so soft and cozy for the winter weather. And your holiday shopping is a breeze with Quince because it has something for everyone. I love to save myself hassle by shopping online, and Quince has free shipping and 365-day returns just in case you need to return something. Quince delivers luxury quality pieces at half the price of similar brands because they cut out the middleman and partner directly with top-tier ethical factories. Step into the holiday season with layers made to feel good, look polished, and last. From Quince. Perfect for gifting or keeping for yourself. Go to quince.com/POTC for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/POTC to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/POTC.
When we start to talk about personal branding, it's really how other people know you outside of, say, your direct inner circle. So it's how the greater public, or even 1 degree outside of your regular circle of folks, knows you. So that's personal branding. It's how we want to be perceived in the outside world. And there's an overlap, of course, with PR, which makes sense. But personal branding is something that I believe that we can control.
That was Goldie Chan on the Psychologists Off the Clock.
We are 5 experts in psychology here to bring you cutting-edge and science-based ideas to help you flourish in your relationships, work, and health.
I'm Dr. Debbie Sorensen, a clinical psychologist practicing in Mile High, Denver, Colorado, author of Act for Burnout and Mac Daily Journal.
From America's Heartland, I'm Dr. Emily Edlin, a clinical psychologist based in Chicago, Illinois, and author of Autonomy Supportive Parenting.
Calling in from Vienna, Austria, I'm Michael Herold, ACT coach, confidence trainer, and the author of an upcoming book on developing your confidence and social skills.
From Boston, I'm Dr. Yael Schoenbrunn, faculty at Brown University and author of Work, Parent, Thrive, and an upcoming book about misunderstanding.
And from coastal New England, I'm Dr. Jill Stoddard, author of Be Mighty, The Big Book of ACT Metaphors, and Imposter No More.
We hope you take what you learn here to build a rich and meaningful life.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock.
Hey, listeners. You know the podcast is values-based work for us and a labor of love. The podcast industry has been a roller coaster ride, and there are some expenses involved in hosting a podcast. We'd love to keep bringing you great episodes, and we could use your support. Help us keep the podcast going next year and beyond. You can do that 2 ways. You can support us on Patreon. For just $5 a month on Patreon, you'll be able to listen to the podcast ad-free. Or show us your love by making a one-time donation in any amount on Buy Me a Coffee. Think of it as taking a co-host out to coffee to thank us for the podcast. You can link to our Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee accounts on our website. Thanks for your support.
Hello, everyone. Michael here. In today's interview with Goldie Chan, we talk about personal branding. Now, I know that is a bit of an unusual topic for our podcast, but when you think about it, I hope it makes sense. So many of our listeners are small business owners in the mental health sector. So that means that to a certain degree, you have to promote what you're doing, but it also means that you're sort of dancing a delicate classic waltz in the world of mosh pits that social media can be at times. I am redoing my website at the moment, and I can tell you that I would much rather be at the dentist than in front of my WordPress installation. And if my dentist is listening, then I hope you can forgive me for saying that. And in the weeks leading up to my interview with Goldie, I read this fantastic 3-part series called Am I a Brand? It was written by one of my favorite psychologists. And so I reached out to her and I got her to do the co-host intro with me. So welcome to the co-host intro, my favorite psychologist, Debbie.
Thanks,
Hi.
Michael.
So tell me, what are your thoughts on personal branding? Like I said, I loved your Substack where you wrote about this. It's in the show notes, by the way, for everyone who wants to catch up on that. But I really enjoyed your thoughts on like building out your website and like putting yourself out there. How did that go for you?
Well, I think that this has been a little bit of a journey for me over a number of years, and it's something I've been grappling with a lot recently and was just putting a lot of thought and reflection into. But I realized like I might write this up because I think other people might be able to relate to that. And that is that over the years, when we launched the podcast, which was 9 years ago now, we had to figure out how to reach people. Like, how do we advertise? How do we put this out there? It was scary. It was hard. And then at some point about, probably 6 or 7 years ago, I moved from a job at a hospital into private practice, and I started a business, and I had to get a website, and people had to find me. And so I had to kind of put myself out there. And so for many years, it was about, okay, how do I get over this promotophobia? So I wrote in one, I wrote in one of the essays that I did an online class with our dear friend Leanne Harris, who sadly has passed away.
Rockstar Leanne.
I know, I loved her. And Miranda Morris on promotophobia and how, if you have something to offer the world, how do you get over this self-consciousness around putting something out there? And, a lot of people get really, it's scary and it's hard and you feel insecure and you have self-doubt. And then, I kind of got a little better at it. I've never been great about it, but I started putting more content out there. But then what kind of prompted me to write this essay is that I just felt really all over the place. Like I grapple with this idea of people as a personal brand.
So when you say you as a brand, what do you mean when you say that?
So this is really complicated. And I think as a therapist, there's a lot of layers to this because, when people come into my office to work with me, there's a lot of therapists in Denver and in Colorado, and they could pick any of them. So it has to be a good fit. And so my brand is partly like, this is me, this is what I offer. And there's a personal element to that. It's me sitting in a room, but it's also, here's my training, here's my specialty. But I have to kind of promote my business by giving people a sense of who I am and what I do so that the people who are looking for what I have to offer can find me. But I think it's also a little bit funny because then you feel like, well, am I selling myself or am I selling my business?
So wouldn't you, in that case, just put the facts on the website? Like, this is me, this is my education, this is my field, this is my telephone number, this is my contact, get in touch. Like, you're not putting any empty promises on your website. You're stating the facts that you can prove through your certification and so on, right?
Yes. And maybe this is where it turns a little bit more into branding, is that you're also trying to give a sense of you, a little bit about your style, your vibe, your personality. And that's, there's been a lot of articles and talk in recent years about this idea of yourself as a brand. And I think in this social media online world we live in, there's a lot of emphasis on that. Like whether you're in your own business or not, you're on LinkedIn and you work for, you're still trying to carve out like, this is me, this is my brand. And it's more than just like you and Goldie talk in the episode about reputation versus branding. And I think in this world we're living in with social media, it's like there's this sense of like you have to kind of carve out your little niche for yourself and you have to be a little bit more personal. And anyway, it's complicated stuff.
Yeah. I found, as I'm like redoing my web presence at this time, I find that it's easy for me to state the facts. My bio is not a problem because I can stand behind all of that. It all happened. Like there's proof, there's a paper trail, right? This is Michael. I also don't struggle with the authentic goofiness that can be a Michael. Like my Instagram account is basically posts full of new toys that I bought. And I don't mind that either, which is probably something I should shy away from more. But what I struggle with is when I tell people like what to expect from working with me. I would tell someone, yeah, when we work on your confidence, you can expect this outcome, which is true. I've done this often enough to know what a realistic outcome for that would be. But I still struggle like putting that concretely out there because it feels like maybe there's a tiny little chance that is not going to come true. And then I lied to someone. If someone comes to me and they say they want to work on their social anxiety or they want to speak up at work more or they need to put down boundaries, I was like, yeah, I've done this often enough. We can totally work on this. There's this part of me that says, what if this is the one person that's not going to succeed with you at Michael? What if this is the one person that, walks out of 8 weeks of coaching and goes like, that didn't work. Never happened. If it ever happens, I'm sure I can handle it as well. But that is the constant like inner dialogue that runs in my mind as I put offers out there.
Well, I mean, I think you're actually being pretty thoughtful and ethical because you're not trying to make anyone a false promise that you can't guarantee. I mean, there's so many variables in the work that you do. If you have a person who signs up for coaching with you and they're just not going to do the work or what, you can't really control the outcome 100%. And so actually maybe you shouldn't do such an outcome-based focus, but rephrase it in a way like, here's what I can help you work on, or here's my goal for how I want to help you or something. But I think that it's actually wise not to promise something that you're not sure about. That doesn't feel good to me either,
Yes, very, very good point. Thank you, Debbie. And I think like, here is my goal, ... is also part of the phrasing that for me, I know it's the right phrasing. I know it's ethical. I know it's correct. And still it brings out this like inner doubt. And like we discuss in the interview as well, sometimes that just requires some, stepping out of the comfort zone and in a values-based way, like step out and show up and see what happens.
That's right. And that's where this idea of willingness is really important when you have something you want to put out there, when you want to start social media or you want to launch your website or sell your business. Most people will have that self-doubt, that imposter phenomenon type thing that Jill talks about so much in her work. And it's about, doing it anyway. And it does, I think that's part of what I've grappled with all along and I'm grappling with in a new way now, which is I want it to feel values aligned. I don't like salesmanship. I did not go into sales for a reason. It feels uncomfortable to me. And you can reframe it a little bit as, and Goldie talks about this in the episode, as like, well, I'm offering something to the world. You have a valuable service, you have expertise and you're offering it. But that doesn't really make this go away. I think you still need to kind of just, go ahead and feel all that stuff and put yourself out there anyway. And I'll tell you, to this day, when I do a Substack post or social media post or something, or even a podcast episode, as you know, Michael, sometimes I put it out there and then I feel a little cringy feeling or a book too, it's like, what if somebody hates it? What if they write a terrible review? What if they criticize me? It's scary. And
it's also, and this is the ironic thing, and we talked about this before we started recording, is that it's actually a really good thing. Like imagine I or you or whatever, we put something out there and then we pound our chests and it's like, this is the best thing that anyone has ever done in the world ever. I'm the coolest person. That would be a lot more problematic than putting something out there and going, I hope I did a good thing here. So humility is a good thing. And the goal here isn't to be grandiose. I think there's plenty of that going around the world these days, but the world needs the humble people to also be putting themselves out there and offering. And actually, one of the things I wrote about in my essay is how sometimes the loudest voices in our space of mental health and psychology, sometimes they're not people who are really good actors, and that's very frustrating to me. But what they're good at is putting themselves out there and getting fame and getting millions of followers online and that kind of thing. And some of them there's a lot of pseudoscience going on or harmful messaging, and it's upsetting to me. And so I'm like, I want the people who have something to offer, but
who are humble to have a space. I just want the world to have room for that too.
It's almost that social media doesn't work. It works in the inverse. Like social media, to me, almost feels like a race to the bottom, almost, of making bigger claims, of making even more certain claims, of making bigger promises. The amount of coaches that I see out there that I instantly unfollow, but or hide, but claims like, 3 things to never feel anxiety again. I'll get you through your trauma in 2 days.
Yeah.
And how is Michael going to stand up with his post that says, you know what, you're going to be anxious for the rest of your life if you do things that are important to you? Well, guess where the like and subscribe goes to? Certainly not Michael. And this is the tricky thing with social media. How's your approach to social media, Debbie? Do you?
So that's one of the things I've been grappling with, because I felt all over the place. I was on all these platforms, but I wasn't really posting, and I don't like recording videos and all the things you're supposed to do to go viral. And so I think at the moment, honestly, I'm just not doing much social media because it hasn't been good for me lately. I've had a lot going on in my life, and I'm like, I took most of it off my phone, so I can't just scroll. I'm not really posting right now, and it feels very nice. And I think we have to examine the role of social media in our life as we go. And this will probably change, but at the moment, I'm just like, I don't want to put my time and energy into that right now. But, over the years, there's times when I'm excited about it and I actually enjoy creating content. I think it's tricky because you have to pick the platforms. Like, you can try to be on all the platforms and post all the time and go viral, but that's the cost of that, is that it's very time consuming.
Yes.
And maybe if you're trying to launch a business, it might be worth it for a while. Or if you're, trying to promote a book or something like that. But even then, I think you have to make some hard choices around okay, this platform works for me. This one doesn't. I could not do all those TikTok videos. That would drive me bananas. So I'm I've never done TikTok. I've never done that. So, trying to, and there's a lot of problematic social media out there, in my opinion. And so I'm just trying to be at a place for myself personally where I'm like, what is the purpose of this? And how do I do this in a values-aligned way that's healthy for me? Right at the moment, I'm not really promoting much of anything, which makes it easier. If I was promoting a book or something, I think I might kind of have to force myself to do a little bit more. But, again, it evolves over the course of time. And so maybe right now you're trying to build yours. And so you're in a really different place than me. But I think you still have to kind of take a look at what's worth the effort too, because some people put a lot of time and energy into doing all these social media things. And it's is it really worth it? I don't know. You have to just ask yourself these hard questions. And that's what I was sort of grappling with.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that, Michael?
For me, it's not values aligned. I know it makes a lot of sense to put the efforts into social media, into Instagram, into Facebook, and all the good stuff, and put the works in, and just do your videos and stuff. And it's just not how I want to live my life. I just don't see myself there. I know I could make good videos, and I know people would get something out of them. I also know that I would just be suffering the entire time, from the recording to the editing to the something here. It's just not me.
I know that Jill has also removed herself from most social media, except I think LinkedIn. She actually was an inspiration to me in doing that. And I think she also has a Substack newsletter too. But I know that she's talked about this, and I have felt this too. She inspired me to take that step back from social media, and I feel better, when I'm not on social media so much.
Yeah, so I think it's obvious that there's a lot of stuff to discuss. And that was also what was going through my mind when I saw Goldie Chan's book, which is called Personal Branding for Introverts, show up. And I thought this is exactly the right person to talk to, because what we haven't addressed, Debbie, is that a lot of people that do this personal branding stuff, when they're introverts, it's even harder to pull off. And I'm certainly counting myself as an introvert. I would assume you're also leaning more towards the introverts side of things. And we've also had enough experience to put ourselves out there to kind of do enough exposure to not struggle with that all too much. But imagine you're a full-blown introvert trying to pull this off. And this is why this book stood out to me. And I was really excited to talk to Goldie about how to pick platforms, how to strike a balance between authenticity, but also how much you're willing to share and put out there, and how to get started if you're just fresh to the entire thing.
Well, and I think one thing Goldie does in this conversation is kind of inspire those who are thinking of doing this. She has some actually practical suggestions and also just some words of wisdom from her own experience putting herself out there. And so if you're grappling with this, I think that this conversation with Goldie will be helpful.
Well, I hope you all enjoy my interview with Goldie Chan. Today, I'm talking with Goldie Chan, an expert for personal branding and the psychology and tactics behind it, and a creative, keynote speaker, author, and cancer survivor. She was named the Oprah of LinkedIn by Huffington Post, and her creative video channel won LinkedIn Top Voice for social media. Goldie founded Warm Robots in 2018, an award-winning social media strategy and creative agency based in Los Angeles with global clients. Previously, Goldie wrote an internationally recognized column for Forbes. Personal Branding and Storytelling in the Digital Age was the name of that column. And it got over 10 million views and won her the Journalist of the Year award from Muse Awards in 2024. Goldie writes for Archie Comics and has been featured as a fresh voice in the New York Times, CNN, Fast Company, and many other outlets. Also, Goldie has worked with Lego on their branding, and since half of what I see on social media are posts by Lego, it's as if she's been part of my life for a while already. Her first book, Personal Branding for Introverts, came out just recently. Hi, Goldie. It's so fantastic to have you here.
Hi, it's so wonderful to be here. I can't wait to talk about how introverts can use their strengths to build their personal brands and hopefully get forward in their careers.
So, personal brands, this is where I think while we get settled in our armchairs and polish the old monocle, let's set the stage for our listeners and get clear on what is a personal brand.
Absolutely. So when we start to talk about personal branding, it's really how other people know you outside of, say, your direct inner circle. So it's how the greater public or even 1 degree outside of your regular circle of folks knows you. So that's personal branding. It's how we want to be perceived in the outside world. And there's an overlap, of course, with PR, which makes sense. But personal branding is something that I believe that we can control.
Hey, it's Michael with a quick announcement. As you might have heard, I'm writing this book about building confidence and finding meaningful connections. Last year, I invited a small group of podcast listeners to be a part of that process. Back then, I thought this would be a one-time experiment. But we had so much fun and I got to meet so many awesome people that I'm doing it again this year. So if you're feeling stuck in your comfort zone, unhappy with your social life, or unsure how to really show up in conversations, I would love to help. We would work together one-on-one for 8 weeks to help you build the kind of confidence that actually lasts. And if you're up for it, I may include a few small moments from our work in my book, or completely anonymously, of course, to help others feel a little less alone in their own process. And as a thank you, I'm offering 50% off my coaching package. If this sounds like a fit, head over to herald.coach/book and get in touch. That's all. Back to the episode. What is the difference between personal branding and reputation then?
Oh my goodness. So I always think that with reputation truly is you're at a party. I think best is always best to do the party analogy, right? So reputation is someone else whispering in someone else's ear about you. So person A whispering to person B, I think that they are great psychologists. And personal branding is saying, I am an expert psychologist because of XYZ, and sharing those things online or offline.
I'm really picky about which podcasts I spend time listening to because I have precious little free time in my busy family life. But I have discovered Silver Linings Handbook, a podcast that captures the intersection of some of my biggest interests: true crime, cults, and the psychology of being perpetrator and victim. What I love about this podcast is how the host, Jason Blair, goes deeper than the sensationalism of the stories. He treats the people involved with deep compassion instead of a salacious headline. Blair is sensitive to the ethics of reporting on true crime and is truly seeking understanding of humanity. I'm listening to his interview with the man who was romantically involved with leader of the Mother of God cult, Amy Carlson. It's fascinating to hear a long-form interview with someone so deeply involved in an experience most of us could never imagine. If you love Psychologists Off the Clock, I bet you'll love Silver Linings Handbook. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at www.silverliningspod.com/POTC.
I am so excited about our newest sponsor, Monarch. You will feel organized and confident in your finances with Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean interface on your laptop or your phone. And right now, just for our listeners, Monarch is offering 50% off your first year with code OFFTHECLOCK at monarch.com. I just set up all my accounts today, and it was so easy to link our bank accounts, our credit cards, our investment accounts. And now my husband and I can both easily access all of our financial information in one place with one login instead of like a dozen. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code OFFTHECLOCK at monarch.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code OFFTHECLOCK. And remember, when you support our sponsors, you're supporting the podcast.
So what are the components that would then go into a personal brand? So when I'm thinking of my own admittedly poor efforts at personal branding, there is my website. Which of course I own. So that is another part of personal branding. And then there is my social media, my Facebook, my Instagram. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of things where I could have a foot in the door, but I don't. What are some other like pieces of personal branding that people might or might not think about?
Right. So those are the two biggest pieces, especially online. I like to think of things very holistically. So you have online and offline. And so many of us think, okay, my personal brand is my LinkedIn profile. And that's it. And that's one component of your personal brand. Now, your personal brand is, if you go to conferences, your personal brand is the talks or the panels that you speak on or moderate. Your personal brand is also those industry connections that you have and those in-person meetups that you do or coffee meetings, etc. Your personal brand is every single one of those. And right before we started, we were talking about Legos. Every single one of those individual Lego pieces that you put together to build the very perfectly shaped, I'm sure, Lego house that is your personal brand. So there's so many different components that go into a personal brand. And a lot of it is not also concrete. So some of it is, right, your reputation is definitely also built into your personal brand, but it's a lot of the stories that we tell in order to be perceived in our careers in a specific way.
So this is really interesting because now I think my personal branding efforts are a little bit better than I initially thought because my network, that is actually something that I am proud of and tracking as well to make sure like no one slips through the cracks, that I know how to reach them, that I know who I am connected to.
Well, not to be meta too, but we are currently on your podcast. And so a podcast is also a great way to grow your personal brand as is having, say, a newsletter like a Substack or Medium or a traditional old school newsletter that exists based off of a website. So all of these are elements that you can use to grow and define your personal brand. In fact, some people are known primarily by their podcasts. So it can be a very, very powerful tool.
So one more component, I think that in today's there's a lot of discussion around how the social media landscape is changing at the moment. So something that stood out for me in your book was the separation between the owned spaces, and there's of course more than just the website that I mentioned in my case, and the what would you call them, borrowed spaces. Like, could you talk a little bit? While we're still in setting up the topic, talk a little bit about the pros and cons for each one of those.
Yeah, I think that for now, let's just call it rented land and own land,
yeah.
Right? So one is your apartment and the other one is your house, I suppose, if you want to think about it that way. So when we're thinking about rented space on the internet, that is all of the social media networks and platforms. So that's your LinkedIn, your Instagram, your Facebook, your Pinterest, your all of these different places online that you can have a presence, but you don't necessarily own that space. As in, if if you remember MySpace, if you were on MySpace and that was your primary place that you existed online and MySpace folded, which it did, then you no longer have that space. And so that's one good way to think about, is this a space that I own or am I renting? So if it's able to be taken away from you by the greater overlords that run it, then that's a space that you're renting. Now, a space that you own is like your website. So if you are, for example, you have purchased that URL that your website is at, you are then also, say, purchasing hosting, you have a website that you've built independently. All of these things create your owned space. And over time, it's fascinating when I think about the early internet, it was really 50-50. You had either your website or you were on MySpace. You're on one of these very early versions of social media as we know it now. And I think that it's evolved so in such an interesting way where we now have the piece of the pie of rented spaces is so much larger, right? We have so many more spaces where we can rent a space. And the way that it makes it easier to rent a space, the way that brands and companies pull us in is that they make it easy to rent. So they say, this is fully furnished, right? You can pick one of these templates and we're done. And you can instantly jump on. So if you're familiar with Instagram, you know that, okay, I'm going to get my username and then I can instantly jump on and post a picture, post a Instagram reel, post a picture of text if you wanted to do that, right? Or do an Instagram live. There's an infrastructure that's already built in versus if you wanted to build your own space, your own website or your own app even, we can even talk about that. You can build an app from scratch. You could build a podcast from scratch. There's so many different things that you can own and you can build the structure of it yourself. And of course, now there's a little bit of muddiness where you can have an owned space where they will give you the structure of that, right? So there's website builders that have pre-existing structures that you can use. So it's been a really interesting evolution towards, I want to say, ease. I think that it is easier than ever, but noisier than ever to build your own presence, especially online, because that's what we're talking about.
And a big part of that is, of course, like creating and posting content. And in that regard, I'm keeping to the forefront myself in mind and my own struggles with posting stuff, but also, of course, our listeners who many of them have small businesses. A lot of them have practices. A lot of them are entrepreneurs and they have a social media presence and they post and some are like just out of the system. Others are like full on in and they post like really regularly and high quality stuff. And then there's a lot that are like me, that post, whenever an opportunity comes along. It's very like,
Right.
random. In my case, I usually post on social media when I have a shiny new toy. So my social media feed looks like that of a deranged magpie. But I wanted to pick your brain on the creating content, posting content, and also picking that platform that works for us. So a lot of people are now leaving certain platforms because they don't want to have anything to do anymore with, platform this and that. And so let me narrow that down and ask you about some like guidelines around creating and posting content that for our listeners in particular, like it is important to not be this noisy, this clickbaity. They want to be authentic. They want to be ethical. Like this is incredibly important for us. And it seems that posts like that can easily be drowned out by shinier, louder, noisier material that's out there.
So let's start with 3 easy words, right? Who, what, where. So who are you trying to speak to? What are you trying to say? And where would you like to say it? Now, where is tied to who? So let's define our who. So who is the demographic that we want to speak to? Now, that might feel very vague, but I like to break it down when I occasionally work with Fortune 500 CEOs to define their personal brands. And when we define our who, I define it not maybe with the traditional demographics that we think when we're doing a research paper, right? Not to say I did my undergraduate in biology, so I understand a little bit about defining those kind of demographics. But when I think about my demographics, I like to think, am I speaking to my peers? Am I speaking to potential clients or bosses? Am I speaking to maybe a mass audience that I'd like to share my expertise with? In that case, that seems like sometimes an easier who to define. And when you figure out, okay, I want to speak to a mass audience, that may then change the who, what, where, the where that you're speaking to. Because if you want to speak to, say, a very broad audience, then maybe a platform like Substack really appeals to you so you can share your wisdom a little bit more broadly. Or maybe you say, I really want to speak to my peers and I know that they're on LinkedIn. So then that also defines the where are you speaking. Now, I think what you're asking though is not the who or the where, but you're asking the what. What am I posting? And then tied to that is not a W word, but a C word, consistency. So what are we posting and how consistent are we going to be with what we're posting? And there's no hard and fast guidelines to how often you should post. So when I blew up on LinkedIn, so when I started to post on LinkedIn, it was 2017, 2018, and I did over 800 daily consecutive videos. So for over 2 years, if you knew that math, I was posting a video a day, along with other content. And that is a little too consistent. That is a little bit too much content. That's not the average person's posting rate. So when I think about posting, I like to think about a cadence that everyone can do. And I love the word cadence because it reminds me of animals, of horses, right? A horse has a specific cadence when it runs. And when it stops, it no longer has a cadence. So think about that when you're thinking about posting content, right? You want to keep a cadence because that keeps you from stopping. So to me, the easiest cadence is once a month. Everyone can find 30 minutes once a month to post one piece of content on the platform of your choice. And I love that you talked about disappearing platforms, which happens over time. Or there's a platform where, say, the politics or the general atmosphere, the platform changes and you no longer want to be on that platform. It's helpful to know what are the other platforms out there. And also, one other thing that's helpful is, how do you like to post? Some of us are incredibly visual, right? So a platform like Instagram or Pinterest might be better. some of us love text. I myself am a writer, so I wrote a book. And so
Really?
I know, yes.
I gotta get that book.
I know you got to get that book, Personal Branding for Introverts. So I like to be on a platform where I can write. Right now, that happens to be LinkedIn and Threads are two platforms where you can write. LinkedIn, Threads, Blue Sky. Honestly, I'm on almost every single platform, social media platform out there. But those are three of the ones right now where you can post text. So it's also helpful. What do you like to post? Now, for our video fans out there, that might be YouTube, right? That might be other video-based platforms. So that's another parameter that's helpful for thinking about it. And each of these platforms also have their own helpful guidelines, I'd say, to how often you should post in order to be successful. And what's interesting is, let's take YouTube as an example. You can have a successful YouTube channel where you quite literally post 4 times a year, but every single time you post that video, that say mini documentary, it goes viral. It does incredibly well. So you can have a successful YouTube channel posting 4 times a year. You can have a successful YouTube channel posting once a week. It really depends on the kind of content that you're posting and also the audience that you're going for. And I think a lot of audiences, except for maybe on TikTok, understand that when you post really high quality, really thoughtful content that takes a long time to create and produce and put together, that maybe you're going to be posting more infrequently, right? And once again, if we look at the platforms like TikTok and Snapchat, this is no longer true. Those are the fast moving platforms. Those are the hungry beasts that need to be fed very regularly. So if that's not the kind of cadence that you want to do with your content, then maybe those are not the platforms that you would want to focus on for your personal brand. Now, of course, I have to shout out LinkedIn because that's where I built my personal brand. And LinkedIn has images, it has text, it has videos. But I will say that, and other people will disagree with me on this, I think it's good to sprinkle in a little bit of your personal life, but keep it primarily focused on your expertise and your work, especially on LinkedIn.
Okay, that is an interesting point that I wanted to touch upon as well. But let me recapitulate what I understood you say about the platform. So it's a mix of various things, of course, and then different platforms have their different formats. I would be having a really hard time working with text when I'm going to YouTube, and to create there would probably not go down that well. So also, I know from my experience that any new platform, people then like flock to, and they go there to find out that, well, it takes a little bit of time to find out how a platform works. I mean, anyone who thinks that you could like quickly take like a platform to its full potential, I invite you to try out something like Discord, where a computer
Discord
science
is another great
master's
platform.
degree like me is like where the manual page is here. Like this is very complex. So it takes time to figure out how a platform works and whether we actually like the way that it works. So would it be correct to assume that there's also like this like dating period with a new platform where we just see like how it works for us, and then however realizing so there's so many data points to capture here, and I'm like vicariously getting anxious about that already, because now I'm testing a new platform, right?
Yeah.
Let it be Blue Sky, just because I'm not there yet. I'm testing out Blue Sky. I realize how it works. I realize, okay, there's like this tagging stuff and the commenting that kind of like, that's my vibe. I like this. But the people that I want to speak to aren't there. So it's like more testing than just looking at the functionalities of the platform. I then need to test a little bit more long term to see if the people that I want to reach are actually there.
I think that you brought up such a great point. So what I was talking about is before really getting on the platform, really understanding what the platforms are, especially the more established platforms, right? I think we know a lot more and we have a lot more data on those platforms. So we know the general demographics of who exists on those platforms. Now, with the newer platforms, that's a huge question mark. We don't know necessarily who's on the newest platform because those communities, and I love that word, are still being built. And you always want to find the community that you want to speak to on the right platform.
The interesting thing, by the way, that you wrote is that getting viral doesn't mean that you build a community. And of course, it doesn't. Just because someone watches a crazy video that I post doesn't mean that I now have people that I can easily reach out to and connect with and all of that stuff.
I think a lot about TikTok, because TikTok is such a powerful platform in that you can have 10 followers and you can have one of your videos go viral, right? You can get millions and millions of views. However, also because of that, because of the way the platform is built, you can get millions and millions of views, but people can see you and then forget you by the next day, by the 24-hour cycle. So just because you go viral, especially once, it doesn't mean that you are building a lasting community around you. And I'm a big fan of not only, I call it evergreen content that someone can watch again in a month and still find value or watch or read or consume or however they interact with it in a month and they still find value. But I also believe in focusing a lot less on virality and saying things that are very contentious and focused instead on trying to find people who want to be in conversation with you, right? And I think it's always powerful to be in conversation with someone instead of shouting at someone, because people may find you interesting if you shout something at them once and they think that's interesting and they may want to discuss it amongst themselves. But it means that if you're always shouting at someone, you're never in conversation. You're never building those relationships that build your network. So I think it's always much more powerful to focus on growing your community. And to jump back to the listeners out there who may feel a little uncomfortable with jumping onto a new platform, building a community from scratch, doing all of that, I think the easiest thing to do is focus on one, right? Always start from one. Start with one platform. What is one platform that you feel comfortable being on and trying to grow your community on there? We talked a little bit also about Discord. Discord is fascinating, right? Discord is a great way to build private communities now. I think of Discord as being almost the new evolution of Facebook groups, which are still also very, very popular and still see quite a bit of engagement as well across the board. But all that being said, there's still so many platforms that have now established communities on them that if you feel uncomfortable with jumping onto a new platform, you can jump onto these platforms that have established demographics, right? Established groups already that you can join into.
Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my site softer?
Can I make my site firmer?
Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side. Your Sleep Number setting. Enjoy personalized comfort for better sleep night after night. And now, max out your savings. The more you buy, the more you save on beds, bases, and more. Plus, get free home delivery on any smart bed with base. Limited time. Check it out at a Sleep Number store near you or at sleepnumber.com today.
I just set up all my financial accounts at Monarch, and I am so pleased with how unbelievably easy it was. I totally get why users and financial experts are in love with Monarch. You will feel organized and confident in your finances with Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean interface on your laptop or your phone. And right now, just for our listeners, Monarch is offering 50% off your first year with code OFFTHECLOCK at monarch.com. Before Monarch, our family finances felt like they were all over the place, and we never really had an accurate picture of our assets and liabilities at any given moment. And now with Monarch, we finally do. We actually feel like grown-ups. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code OFFTHECLOCK at monarch.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code OFFTHECLOCK. And remember, when you support our sponsors, you're supporting the podcast.
You said something interesting earlier that I wanted to come back to, and that was about privacy or separating like personal lives. And I want to tag something on to that when posting is very important to me and might run counter to that. And the keyword here is authenticity. So showing up authentically in those posts, creating that conversation, not being contentious, but extending a hand for a conversation, adding value. Where's that line for too authentic, if that can even be possible to be too authentic? I think, well, at the end of each podcast we co-hosts, we joke about suffering from a vulnerability hangover. And by joke, I mean cry. And so there is maybe too much authenticity. Where does that line lie? What are some guidelines around that?
So I'm going to use a powerful word that I'm sure everyone who's listening on here knows, maybe even in your clinical work or your academic work, and that's boundaries, right? And especially if you're an introvert out there. So let's bring it back to introverts. Especially if you're an introvert, I think understanding how to do boundary setting with our personal brands and our online and offline personas or personalities, I think that is where you will have the healthiest version of your personal brand. So, and we want to go back to the word authenticity. I think sometimes folks misunderstand virality, they misunderstand loudness, and all of these other words for being authentic. Now, authentic to me means simply sharing part of who you really are with the rest of the world. And authenticity can show up in so many different ways. And some people think being authentic means sharing your deepest, darkest secrets offline. I personally don't believe that that's the case for some people. And I'll go back to some of these CEOs I work with. For some people, authenticity meant sharing that they had their third child, right? Sharing some of the struggles that their partner has gone through. That's real authenticity because it strikes an emotional chord. And I love talking about authenticity from that angle, which is, does it strike an emotional chord in you, yourself? And does it maybe strike an emotional chord in your audience as well? So one of the biggest struggles I went through that we haven't talked about is I'm actually a cancer survivor, and I made a very conscious decision to share my journey online. And so many people don't share their health journey online. And of course, the reason being privacy, right? Yeah. And for me, I wanted to share it online because it was harder for me to talk around it than to talk through it. And because I'm so present online, I think people would have found out anyways. But it was just so much easier for me to share that piece. And that wasn't me thinking strategically, I'm going to be more authentic, so I'm going to share this online. That was simply me saying, this is such a huge part of my life. It's hard to not share that I'm going to the hospital and doing all these things. And also with just my clients and my work, it was so much easier for me personally to share publicly that I'm going through it. And then everyone implicitly understood that that was why I couldn't do a certain project or why I was turning down work. And I think that authenticity, once again, is what do you feel comfortable setting that boundary as? So instead of saying authenticity is all those little pieces that you pull out of yourself, I think authenticity is that healthy gate or barrier that you set. And especially for, once again, introverts who have limited energy, and this is true for extroverts too, have maybe limited emotional energy, right? You're just talking about crying after doing a podcast. Having those healthy boundaries with what we share online is so helpful. Now, sharing nothing personal at all also gives you a very dry personal brand, right? It becomes robotic. It becomes stale. So we want to make sure we're sharing at least some of our personal life and our personality through our personal brand. And for some, once again, I remember I had a client and they never wanted to share about their family or where they lived. And that's absolutely okay.
Yeah, of
but
course.
What they did, of course, what they did need to share, what was helpful for them to share is their personality, right? Who they are as a person. What do they find funny or amusing or interesting or intellectually stimulating? All of these things are the helpful vulnerabilities that you can share. So you don't always need to share what other people are sharing. But once again, I think it's helpful to bring back boundaries, emotional safety, all of these elements that I think make a healthy personal brand. Because also, if you share, let's just be real, if you share your deepest, darkest secrets in one go, in 1 week, and you never come back to that, or you don't want to keep diving into those things, well, then you've shared all your content that you have. So it's much more interesting to have interest over time that you share, and interests and thoughts and concerns. And like I said, things that resonate with you emotionally and intellectually. I think those are two really helpful ways to think about if you're stuck on content to share. Think about what actually interests you personally.
Those are some really good ways to think about that. I love the boundary part, like defining it almost in the inverse of saying, like, where do I not want to go for very good reasons. Well, Goldie, thank you so much. We're unfortunately at the end of our time together, even though I have so many more questions I'd love to throw at you. So I'll close with this one. Where can our listeners find you on the internet? And we're, of course, like put all of that in the show notes, but where would you like to send them?
Yes, so you can always find me on my website, goldiechan.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'll actually say the URL, linkedin.com/in/Goldie. Yes, I got my own name. And you can also find me for my more personal journey on Instagram. And my handle on there is Goldie Cylon, Cylon.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Goldie. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. You can now listen to our podcast ad-free by becoming a supporter on Patreon. You can link to Patreon on our website or go to patreon.com/offtheclocksite. If you enjoy our podcast, you can help us out by leaving a review and sharing this episode with a friend or an enemy who would enjoy it.
You can get more psychology tips by subscribing to our fabulous newsletter on Substack. Or if you're still addicted to social media, find us on Instagram and LinkedIn.
We'd like to thank our rockstar production manager, Jadine Stout-Williams.
Now for the boring part. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatment. If you're looking for mental health treatment, please visit the resources page of our website, offtheclockpsych.com.